get started here. This is the latest update for subtropical storm Alberto. This is as of the 11 a.m. Eastern Time advisory information. Okay. Right now, subtropical storm Alberto is centered just off of the Florida Panhandle and will be making landfall here very shortly over the next couple hours. Heavy rain and flooding continues to be the primary concern for our area as Alberto makes landfall and then moves northward over the next couple of days. Since soils are so saturated already, given all the rain that we've already had, lower wind speeds could cause some trees to fall, even if we're not going to see any of the higher winds that they're getting down to the south. As far as our threats, if you've been on the briefings the last couple of days, you'll notice that our threat bars here are in the same position as they have been, with rainfall and flooding being a high threat for our area, and winds and tornadoes a lesser threat but non-zero. At this point, winds are on the lower end of the moderate impact range you see there, and that's primarily going to be relegated to the south and western portions of our area, and I'll show you that here in just a little bit. Here's the latest information for Alberto. Maximum sustained winds were 60 miles per hour, and it's slowly moving northward into the Florida Panhandle this afternoon, and that track is going to continue into southern Alabama and then into Alabama through the day tomorrow. And the threat for heavy rain and flooding will increase for us during that time frame as the rain and thunderstorms associated with Alberto spread northward beginning this afternoon and into this evening. The wind speed probabilities you'll see here for tropical storm force winds are mainly going to be relegated down into the Florida Panhandle and southern Alabama. So tropical storm force winds are unlikely in Georgia at this point. However, given, as I mentioned already, the wet soils, some trees will likely fall even with some subtropical storm force wind gusts that we'll be getting in our area. Here are the forecast maximum wind gusts in Georgia as we go into tonight and into tomorrow. Maximum gusts, generally speaking, in the 30 miles per hour range or less for most of the area. You see the highest generally along the western border, closer to where the center of Alberto will be moving into Alabama. There is the potential for some slightly higher gusts, maybe 40 miles per hour or higher, in some of the rain bands or isolated heavier downpours that move through. So that is a potential that is there. These wind gusts, strongest ones, will be beginning this evening and really into the overnight hours into early tomorrow morning. Some potential for at least some isolated power outages is there given the wet soils. So any gusts over 30 miles per hour could down some weaker trees. Here is the latest forecast storm total rainfall. So this is looking from today through Wednesday at 8 p.m. So the heaviest rainfall will begin really into this evening and into the Wednesday time frame. That's when most of this is when we're looking at it. As you can see, widespread 2 to 4 inches of rain, and in some locations, especially keying in on some of the northeast Georgia mountain areas, but some locations could see 4 potentially to 6 inches, or a couple of even locally higher amounts possible as well. But generally most areas, 2 to 4 inches is a pretty good bet. Just wanted to reiterate, we do have the flash flood watch out given those heavy rainfall amounts and all of the rainfall that we've seen in the last week or so. So most of the area is through that flash flood watch through Wednesday morning. This is a short-term model radar image that I'm showing you here. I'm just showing you the overall evolution as Alberto moves northward through the remainder of today and into tomorrow. You can see it will relatively quickly move up into southern Alabama by tomorrow morning, and then through the day tomorrow the center will be moving through Alabama but you do see a lot of banding and rainfall pushing into Georgia through this time frame, and that's when our heavy rainfall threat will be increasing with those bands, especially if they train over a specific area, and then also the threat for any gustier winds and even an isolated tornado threat as well, which I'll be detailing a little bit more in a couple of slides. I wanted to break down the expected rainfall through the next few days as far as how much we're anticipating. This is the expected rainfall generally through the day today and into tomorrow morning. So you can see that the heaviest rainfall will be near to the center, especially over into Alabama, but a good bit of that heavier rainfall potential does extend into our area, with the highest expected amounts there along the Alabama-Georgia border as the center works its way northward through the overnight hours tonight. As we get into the Tuesday time frame, that axis of heavier rainfall will shift northward, so we're talking about primarily northern Georgia where the heaviest totals are expected. This would be Tuesday into Wednesday morning, and so you can see potential for at least a couple of inches or more across North Georgia during this time frame. And then as we get into Wednesday, as the remnants of Alberto continue to move further north, overall we're expecting less rainfall on Wednesday by the time we get to that point, but still locally heavy rainfall will remain possible during the day on Wednesday. This is just showing you some of the rain totals that we experienced over the past 24 hours. I wanted to highlight that some areas did receive some heavy rainfall amounts, 2+ inches yesterday afternoon, so that added to the rain that we already had several days prior shows you that the soils are very saturated in some areas. So once this heavier rainfall starts moving in, especially as you see over there where they had a good bit of rain north of Columbus yesterday, that could portend some flooding issues there. So we have some very wet antecedent conditions at this point. This is from the WPC excessive rainfall outlook. I wanted to step through the next few days. They are highlighting a pretty high risk of flooding potential really across our entire area, but specifically focusing on through tonight and into tomorrow morning, the western portions of the area, especially down towards Columbus, Americus, and then up towards Carrollton. That area highlighted in red is their moderate risk area. So that's really where they're keying on the heaviest rainfall totals and the highest flash flooding risk. But even in the slight risk and marginal risk shading areas, that flash flooding risk will remain a concern in those areas as well. And as we head into tomorrow, as I mentioned, the axis of heavier rainfall will gradually shift to the north, so that moderate risk for flash flooding that they highlighted has shifted up into northeast Georgia, with the slight risk covering the majority of the area through the day tomorrow into tomorrow night. So that flash flooding risk is pretty significant, and it does linger into tomorrow as well. And then as we get into Wednesday, it does start to taper off as overall rainfall amounts should begin to wane a little bit, but we do still have a marginal risk for excessive rainfall still highlighted across the majority of the area. So locally, heavy rainfall and flooding concerns continue as we head into Wednesday. I did mention the tornado potential. That is something else we'll be watching this afternoon and then into tomorrow as well. Much of north and central Georgia is actually included in the marginal risk for severe thunderstorms from the Storm Prediction Center. We're not expecting widespread tornado risk, but definitely the risk for some isolated tornadoes will be possible as the bands move into Georgia beginning this afternoon and then persisting into the day tomorrow. So don't be surprised if we do get a couple of tornado warnings during that time frame. And here is our outlook for the next week with our hazards. Really through the day today and into tomorrow is going to be the prime time for the heaviest rainfall, as well as any severe risk with isolated tornadoes and the gustier winds. And then tapering off. Really, by the time we get to Wednesday, things should begin to wind down a little bit, but obviously there could be some lingering flooding issues, especially on waterways, if we do get any heavy rainfall during that time frame. So that's something to keep in mind even as we head later into the week. Just to summarize, so things should start to pick up pretty well by this evening as far as the heavy rainfall and thunderstorm threat increasing as Alberto moves northward and the bands move into Georgia. We still think heavy rainfall and flooding will be the primary concern for our area through the next couple of days, but secondarily, some of the gustier winds could down some trees, cause some isolated power outage issues, as well as the isolated tornado threat through the remainder of today and into tomorrow. So that's really where we stand right now. So the next Hurricane Center update will be 2 p.m. for the intermediate update and then 5 p.m. for the full update. At that point, Alberto should be on shore and moving northward. So that's what I have at this point.